Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Tritter. I'm the Director of Professional Learning at the BTU, and I want to welcome you to this informational webinar on Schedule A ELT, Teacher Facilitated Time for facilitators and others. I'm here with a couple of colleagues who I'll let introduce themselves.
So my name is Jeff Parks. I work at the Edward Everett Elementary School. I teach third grade there, but I'm also the lead teacher and a Teacher Facilitated Time facilitator.
And I'm Maggie Riddell. I'm the project manager here at Boston Public Schools for the Schedule A initiative within our Office of Expanded Learning Time.
What we have today for you is just an overview of the teacher facilitator role, a little bit about Schedule A ELT itself. We're going to show you a little bit about how teachers across the district are using TFT, a little bit about the trainings, and then we're going to give you some of the practical pieces of the training so that if you haven't been able to get to one yourself yet, you have a few tools to get yourself started, and then we'll connect you to some resources that you can use to get yourself started if you're in need of a little bit of support and all of that moving forward.
So every good plan starts with objectives. So our objectives for this webinar: explain the purpose of TFT and how it's used in ELT schools, introduce the role and responsibility of the teacher facilitators, provide resources so facilitators kind of can get started, and then introduce practices and protocols to use.
So just by way of orientation, you are watching this as a video right now, so you can't click on any of the links that you see in the slide deck. So if you want to take a moment now to open up another link, so another tab in your browser, and navigate to bit.ly/TFT webinar. And please make that link is case sensitive, so the TFTW needs to be capital when you type it in. You'll find a link to this slide deck so you can go through along with us. Click on the links to resources that are interesting to you or that you find helpful. And if you want to just watch now and click later, you can do that too. But this might help you a little bit more to find this experience a bit more interactive. So hopefully, I'm going to stall for a minute so that those of you who are typing it in can find it.
Great. So I'm going to start off first by sharing an overview of Schedule A, sort of big picture. So the Schedule A Memorandum of Agreement was reached between the BPS and the BTU in January of 2015. And the goal of this initiative was to expand the school day for all of our traditional K-8 schools by 40 minutes. So Boston had one of the shorter school days across the country. And by adding these 40 extra minutes, we're able to better serve our students by either offering additional academic support, enrichment, interventions. Our teachers are using this time in numerous different ways to better serve our kids. And it's equal to almost adding an entire month of school. So it's very impactful for our kids across the K-8 schools. In addition to the extra time for students, the agreement also provides teachers an additional 75 minutes of planning each week. And 40 minutes of that time is teacher-directed collaborative time, which we often refer to as TFT, or teacher-facilitated time, as well as the additional 35 minutes of P&D time that you get in your schedule each week. So we have a total of 58 Schedule A schools that moved to this expanded learning day over the last 3 years. The Schedule A schools encompass all of our Boston Public Schools traditional K-8s. So if you're a K-5, a 6-8, or a K-8, you are now on this expanded day. There are a lot of schools in our district that have other types of schools that also have expanded time. But when we talk about Schedule A expanded learning time, we're referring to these 58 schools. So over the last 3 years, we have moved to the expanded learning day in a cohort model. So in our first year, 2015-16, 16 schools started the expanded learning day. In 16-17, we had 2 more schools move. And then this year, in the beginning of September, when we started school, we had our last 39 schools starting their expanded learning day. So now we have all 58 schools are on this added 40 minutes to their school day.
All right, so what is TFT, Teacher Facilitated Time? Basically, it's a weekly collaborative P&D period. So P&D, you usually do your own work In a collaborative P&D, like this is, it's teacher directed, but you're doing it together with a number of people, a number of other teachers in the building. You should have one 40-minute or longer TFT period per week. Some schools have 43 minutes, some schools 48, some schools 50. But as long as you have at least one 40-minute period per week of TFT, you're all set. And all teachers who receive P&D and CPT should have a TFT period. The purpose of the TFT time is to meet the needs for teachers to have collaborative time with colleagues during the longer school day, to improve the collaborative culture and climate in your school, and to build facilitative teacher leadership capacity in your school and across the district.
So TFT is a little different than some of the other groups that you may be a part of. The ELT is directed by the administration, and it usually focuses around the instructional focus or quality school plan. So it's not that. Common planning time also kind of comes from the top down, based on what the administration is asking the teams to work on. P&D is a personal self-directed. So TFT is more about a group collaboration. Think of it as a group P&D.
Two other things that TFT is not are optional and secret. So we get a lot of questions about this. I know Maggie gets a lot of emails about it. I know I get a lot of emails about it. So even though it's time for teachers to do as they choose, it is time for teachers to do as they choose together. So it's not optional to attend your TFT time. You have to go, and you can be held accountable for your attendance. And it's also not secret. It is true that the time is directed by the teachers. You don't have to run the agenda by the administrator, but it shouldn't be some secret planning time that no one knows about. But it is time for the teachers to decide what to do. And we have a lot more about this in the FAQ that's linked at the bottom of this slide. And it addresses some of those common myths and misconceptions and gives you a little bit more detail about some of the requirements of the time.
So the role of the teacher facilitator is really to support the learning of the colleagues in your team. You can do this by making sure you manage the time well, provide agendas that cover kind of a range of topics, keeping in communication with your school leader about things that she's noticing and what you're discussing during this TFT. She or he, sorry, mine's she. But you're not required to facilitate other meetings. Just because you have the role of facilitator, you are not the building facilitator. You're only the teacher facilitated time facilitator. So you can see a link to a job description below.
So there are a couple of measures of accountability for this time, but it's pretty basic. We will be providing each teacher facilitator a stipend of $1,000 per year for serving in the role. And what we ask for at the end of the year, just to have some documentation of the work that you've done over the course of the year, is for you to share a simple list or chart of the meeting dates you've had over the course of the year and what topics you covered. It does not need to have every single detail of what you talk about or be meticulous in any way. We're just looking to get an idea of the time you've spent and what are the general topics you have discussed during your teacher facilitated time. And our ELT team will ask you to submit a short annual report of how you use your time at the end of the year, rather how this time is being used in our schools and the impact that it's having on our teachers and our kids. And so that's an important thing that we get from you before we can process the PS09s to disperse your payment at the end of the year.
And so while we're talking about how you use your time, we're going to move into an overview of how teachers across the district are using their TFT time, with a couple of specific bright spots of stories we know of people using it particularly well, which is not to the exclusion of ones we don't know about, but there are a couple of really good stories we'd like to share. So how do teachers use TFT? You can look at student work, you can help each other with unit or lesson plans. You can spend the time to solve challenges or work on questions of practice with one another, or work on shared projects that other times don't allow for. And Jeff was just added this last bullet too, as his team is getting started this year.
Yeah, so ELT time is kind of new for all of these 39 schools. So my team really thought, okay, how can we best use our kind of extended day? So we started the year by planning for interventions and enrichments and creating a schedule for those to get started.
I typed that in, and I haven't seen the word enrichments before, but I really like it. So, so here's a couple of spotlight bright spots of how people are using TFT time. So one is the 5th grade team at the Harvard Kent Elementary School. You can see a link down at the bottom to a full case study about what they're doing, and I'd really encourage you to read it. But they were working on a new model of math instruction where they were doing flexible grouping across classes. So they, in order to manage this, they really thought, we don't quite have enough time in our CPT to do this, and our P&D, when we're working individually, isn't really going to allow us for the collaborative time we need. So they did careful planning during their TFT time to coordinate lessons across the 4 classes. They were able to drill down to discuss specific students and with that extra time, and also to ensure that each student continued to be appropriately placed in the different groups. And I really do encourage you to have a look at that full case study that's linked down there. A second one that's really exciting is the specialist team at the Chittick, which is facilitated by Coriana Bradford. So Coriana describes in general how they use the time, saying it's for team-specific items that just don't seem to make it up to the agenda of PD or CPT or other times. They share what they're teaching, they co-plan, and they use strategies that work with students that they're having challenges with, and it really is able to meet their needs. And the Chittick team created an interdisciplinary project. So Coriana had gone to a professional development with the arts department where she got a biography about Malala Yousafzai, the international activist and women's education advocate. And she worked together with the 5th grade ELA teacher and the other arts teachers to really create this interdisciplinary art project where students created a dance and a song and visual art about Malala. And I encourage you to read the whole story, but I'll spoil the end for you, which is the work they did was so fantastic that they were chosen at the opening of school this year to present their song and dance to the mayor, the superintendent, and all of BPS leadership at the August Leadership Institute. And it's really gratifying to know that they were able to get that project done through the collaborative work in the TFT time.
So there is a training that we're offering in the upcoming months that people have found really valuable in thinking about facilitation and making their team kind of use the time to its best. The goal of this training is to really increase teacher leadership and peer collaboration. It takes 2 days. It's 1 evening and 1 full day. You can sign up on My Learning Plan now. It is led by teachers, me being one of them, and we take that time to practice protocols and facilitation skills. It's very interactive. We don't just sit you in a room and talk at you for 8 hours. We're really getting you in the mindset of being a teacher facilitator.
And you do get PDPs for this session because it'll be over 10 hours total.
And you don't have to take our word for it. So Katie Grassa, the principal at the Curley K-8 school, gave us some of this feedback from her teachers about really the value of it. I think kind of confirming what Jeff just said, that it's really having that positive impact on the collaborative nature of the school community, that the feedback's been positive, and that there's really a focus around facilitating learning for teachers, not just telling people what they need to know. So we're really proud of that. And we really encourage you to attend. So we're gonna move forward into giving you some specific practices and resources, but it's really important to stress at this point that attending the training is really gonna bring it to life. It's really a practice-focused training. And it's easy to talk about this stuff, but it's much easier to learn it when you get the practice in the training.
So this will get you started. The training is gonna keep you going and keep you successful.
So over the course of this year, this fall you'll do the initial training, and then over the course of the winter and the spring semesters, we're going to be offering some ongoing support to enable your growing leadership as a teacher facilitator. This is going to be opt-in, so very up to how you want to develop and grow. But we're going to offer some additional training, also some coaching supports, and focus on creating these communities of practice, both in person and virtually, for us to share best practices for how this teacher collaboration looks. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our expanded learning time team will be capturing case studies to share across the network how every school is doing this time and the great impact that we're accomplishing for kids and teachers.
So at the training, these are kind of the big objectives, the big skills that we try to help you learn during the training. So identifying the work style of the members of your team, setting norms and holding the team accountable to them, creating a focus for the learning, effective agendas, using protocols to reflect on practice, learn from student work, and more, and how to facilitate conversations to move toward a shared goal and to find help when you face a challenge. Those are really the objectives for the training. We're going to touch on some of those here, but again, we really encourage you to sign up for the training.
Do the training.
Do it. It's going to be amazing.
All right, so we're kind of shifting gears. The next part of the presentation is about giving you things to use in your TFT time. So we're going to cover kind of articles and protocols and how to get started coming up now. So the first thing is thinking about this group as a community of practice. It's a little different from a team. The idea is it's made up of the people that are doing the work, and it's decided on by the people that are doing the work. So you can see the link up at the top from your teacher resource book that we will get to you. It is an article that I used in my first meeting just to share with the group, to kind of get everyone on the same page and mindset. Next. So one thing that can be hard if people are worried about buy-in, what if they don't want to do it? It's not optional, so they have to do it. But to make sure that it's valuable, you want to make sure everyone cares about the work they're doing. And that's why this time is so important. You talk and you share and you think about how can we best use the time. And this needs to be an ongoing kind of conversation in order to make sure the work continues to have meaning. If people feel like it's meaningful, then they're going to do the work and it's going to be successful. And also to help getting buy-in is to set up norms. We're going to talk about that in a second.
All right, so just want to pause here and let you know that we're going to really get into the practice here. And one thing that we're going to sort of be repeating over and over again is this idea of protocols and facilitating protocols. So there's a link here to the teacher facilitator resource book, and that has a bunch of protocols. It also has a lot of articles and other types of resources and reading. But in particular, you'll notice a lot of protocols for group formation, organizing for work, analyzing a text, and examining teacher and student work. These are the kinds of activities that people tend to do in TFT and other collaborative groups, and it's a good way to structure your time. You don't have to use protocols, but it certainly is a way to do it.
And there's a link also at the bottom for the School Reform Initiative. This is kind of like a group that came up with all these protocols, a group of teachers. There's a million different protocols that you can find over. We're going to cover a couple of them.
I can't say enough about how valuable that resource is from SRI, School Reform Initiative. They have protocols indexed by purpose and feature and all that. Let's talk a little bit more about protocols just before we get into some specific ones. So we know that a lot of times people are not super comfortable with protocols, especially if they don't have a lot of experience with it. A lot of people say, I hate protocols. Why do we always have to use them? So here are just some thoughts about why. One, protocols go against the grain of how we usually talk in school. So we've all been in meetings where one person dominates the conversation, or where you never really get anywhere, or everyone talks about big ideas and you never get anything specific done. A protocol really helps you focus the conversation by saying, what's our purpose? If we want to talk about big ideas, let's choose a protocol that's good for big ideas. If we want to get something specific done, let's talk about a protocol that provides for some specific next steps. And so it really helps to focus the conversation in that way. And it's an agreement that you enter into. So we all are clear on the purpose. and we agree that we're going to have a conversation in a certain way in order to accomplish that purpose. They structure equity into a conversation. So equity is obviously a tricky thing to achieve, but you'll notice as you practice more with protocols that they have set times, there are certain turns for people to speak, and we do this in order to make sure that people are heard, or that people are heard to the extent that they want to be heard in the conversation. They can provide focus and clear roles. I think focus we've talked about, but clear roles like who's the presenter, who's giving feedback, who's receiving feedback, who's facilitating. And that can help take away some of the uncertainty in a meeting. They can be an efficient use of time. So as you know, the TFT time is 40 minutes. And once you've gotten your kids off to that special and stopped in the bathroom, that 40 minutes might be down to 35 or 33 or 30 minutes. So really structuring the time tightly can allow you to get something valuable done, even in a short amount of time. Protocols ask people and support people in deprivatizing their practice. So sharing your work, your teacher work, or your students' work is not always an easy thing to do. So a protocol can be a safe way of having someone bring some of their work and to get feedback on it without feeling too vulnerable, but also having a strong group around it can help to support and make people feel a little bit more comfortable bringing in that work to share with others. And it builds collaborative skills and habits. You'll see a lot of the same practices repeated over and over again in protocols, like a debrief at the end, like time for clarifying questions, like a time where a presenter will be quiet and not answer any questions as they come up so that they can hear how thinking develops without their input. You'll see these practices and you'll get used to how they work over time. And you'll really fall in love with protocols, I'm sure. And always time for reflection, and as I said at the beginning, matching the purpose of the conversation. Jeff was kind enough to include a quote from me over there on the side, but it's really helpful to not think of a protocol as this structure that restricts you and more as the rules of a game. So if you're entering into a game, we play a game just like baseball or football or basketball or any other game, Monopoly, has rules that you have to follow.
Scrabble.
Yeah, whatever. Let's name some games. You can think of a protocol like a game, and if it works for you, keep doing it. And if it doesn't, make a tweak and see if you can fix it later. But always try it out once to see how it goes.
So if you can't tell, Paul really loves protocols, but I can say that he has made me a believer. So some of the steps when using a protocol as a facilitator, you need to make sure to prep the conversation with whoever's presenting. Like Paul said, the time goes quick, so you want to come in with a clear focus. To make sure that everyone has a chance, you can rotate presentations among the members. Hopefully the norms have been set and help encourage participation. Kind of keep the conversation moving towards the goal or the question. Kind of review the protocol steps in advance. Sometimes you might want to tweak something or change the timing, take out a step if it doesn't feel right for your group. Keep track of time. Don't skip the debrief because that kind of can bring a lot of insights to the forefront. And then trust the process. Play the game, and we think that you will find it valuable. All right, so I said we're going to get to setting norms. So this is one of the protocols we use called forming ground rules. It's pretty simple, and you can see it in your book on page 7. Each person starts by making a list of what they need to work productively. This is about what they need, and they can just write down as many things as they can think of. So going around in a circle once everyone's finished, have each person name one thing from the list, and the facilitator can write these down, type them up in the agenda. If you see a repeat, you can kind of just skip over that and cross it off. So once all ideas are listed, take time for any group members to ask clarifying questions about what they meant or what someone thought of when they wrote this. Sometimes you'll get a really long list, so the next step is to kind of combine the items to make it more manageable. You want to shoot for about 6 norms. Anything more can feel uncomfortable and kind of too much. So at the end is kind of the kind of time to debate and discuss these norms. And the idea is you check for consensus. Everything may not be your favorite thing in the world, but you have to answer these two questions. Are there any of these rules that are going to be hard to follow? And then can everyone live with what is listed? You can live with it, and people think it's beneficial for the group, then, let's give it a try.
And one of the things that we stress in the training about norms is that norms shouldn't just be a piece of paper that you have that sits on the wall. It should be a living part of your group. So make sure that you're checking them at the beginning of each meeting to make sure that people re-enter into those agreements about how you're going to work together.
So after you've set your norms, it's time to decide how to use their time. So we have another protocol for that. This one's called affinity mapping. And the idea is that you pose an open-ended question. In this case, the question is, how are we going to use our TFT time? So group members write ideas on a sticky note and make sure it's one idea per note. After everyone's written down their ideas, you can take turns reading these ideas aloud. And you want to stick the notes on the wall or a surface, chart paper, whatever works for your group. I use a whiteboard. And then silently, which can be challenging, silently people are going to move the notes to similar ideas to kind of create categories or themes. If someone moves your note, you don't think that's what you meant, you got to let it go. It's not intentional, and you can discuss it towards the end. So once the Post-its have stopped moving, you have an open conversation to identify the themes and ideas that you've come up with, and those can be your topics for your agendas. In our affinity mapping, we did this today. We came up with things like interventions, planning ELT time, looking at student work, discussing data of the interim. So those are how we're going to use our meetings.
Just say with that silent time of moving the sticky notes around, paying attention during that time can help you to see what are the disagreements that we have here, what are the kind of things that we need to talk about when we get into the open conversation. So.
All right, so we're going to go over some protocols that are kind of going to help you get started and get used to the process. The first one being success analysis. This is a protocol used for sharing best practices, for sharing professional success with other people. So the first step is to identify the success. This should be done before the meeting with the presenter and the teacher facilitator, so we can use all the time in the 40 minutes. So the presenter starts by describing their success and what they have done. The group examines the work, whether that be a plan or student work or an activity that the students took place in. Then the group asks any clarifying questions, right? What did you do here? What did you mean by this? How did this happen? After that, the group reflects on the success story. This is where the presenter is silent, just listening, absorbing, thinking about, okay, what different perspectives are out there. After that 10 minutes, the presenter reflects, saying what they heard from the group and what was valuable to them. And then the group takes the next time to make connections and how they can apply this to the classroom we're learning. And for every protocol, it is valuable to debrief the process. How did this protocol process go? Is there anything you can change for next time? We found it valuable, and I'm sure you will.
And just to add one note on the success analysis protocol, it can also be a really nice protocol for a group that's not super comfortable with sharing work or with protocols, because it focuses on a success and you're focused on something that went well. That habit of sharing and asking questions and looking at each other's work. So it's a great place to start for a group that's newer to this kind of work.
All right, so the next two are very similar. The first one is what, so what, now what, is more of a general way to think about something. You basically ask yourself, what did you do, or what are you working on? So what, why are you working on this? And then the now what is how we're gonna kind of push it forward. So a kind of more structured, focused version of this is called the tuning protocol. So this is a protocol for getting feedback. It can feel comfortable at first, but it's called tuning because we're not judging the work. We're just trying to make it more in tune with the goals of the work. So the idea is, before the meeting, the presenter and the facilitator have decided on a plan, a task, a mini lesson that they want to look at and figure out how to make it more in tune. I said that twice, but that's important. In tune, in tune. So you start the meeting by presenting, thinking about what the context of the plan is, what goals drive the plan, and you want to end the presentation with a focus question. Usually, what are you trying to get out of this task, out of this plan?
And one really important step that helps people stay focused on the question is to write it on a whiteboard or a piece of chart paper or something like that, so everyone in the group is always looking at the question and making sure that their feedback is aligned to it.
So next you have the clarifying questions. It's the chance of the group to ask any questions of the presenter. And then we move into the examination of the plan. So that gives the participants a chance to look at the notes, not look at the notes, look at the plan, take notes, or look at the work and just kind of see what is happening. The next step is, once again, the presenter needs to be silent because they're just listening and thinking and reflecting. The participants will talk to each other about the plan, really focusing on the focus question, okay? How can we make sure that this plan matches up with the goals?
And here's a piece, as we said in that earlier section, where it can seem a little weird, right, for the person to be sitting there quietly. But this really is a part where, as you listen as the presenter, you start to see your own work from a lot of different perspectives, especially when people are staying focused on that question.
So whatever you do, don't talk, just listen. I know it's hard. Then you get the chance at the end to reflect, kind of talk about what you learned. It says a she here, but there are also male teachers, or what he learned from the feedback. And it's not a time to defend yourself. It's a time to reflect on how we can better this in the future and take it back to your practice. And like I said, always debrief. How did this feel? How did this go? Was this a valuable time?
Don't skip the debrief.
Okay, so I'm in the mix. I'm doing this at my school. This is kind of how I thought about the first couple meetings. The biggest question is, what is this TFT? What are we doing here? So thinking about getting everyone on board with this time, you can hand out the documents, the frequently asked questions that we linked before and again. You can hand out the teacher facilitator description, which is in your resource book and also linked here. And then share that article, Communities of Practice, making sure that everyone has a sense why you're here, why you're doing this work. So the second meeting is about kind of organizing for work. So norms are really important. We should also already talked about the forming ground rules protocols, and then determining how to use your time. You could use the affinity mapping for that. If norms take a while or something else comes up, you can move the affinity mapping back, but it does need to be one of the first things. It's going to help you set your schedule. So I've shared some sample agendas that we've used in my school, and I think I've deleted all the sensitive information there, but take a look. It's a great rolling agenda template that I think we're going to show you next.
Cool. So here are some resources that are available to you. There's a lot that you can find online. So the ELT and TFT overview has basically all of the resources that we've shared, like the role description, the FAQs, the myths, all in one place. And also has all the contact information for our expanded learning time Schedule A team. So if you need to get in touch with us, there's a shared folder that has a bunch of TFT resources. One of the resources in there is the entire teacher facilitator resource book, but there's also additional protocols and other resources that we have added over time. And then the last one is a Excel sheet that is the TFT facilitators by school, so you can check and see if they're correct for your school if you'd like. And update any missing information. And then if you have any questions, feel free to email Paul or me or one of the school design coaches on my team. None for Jeff.
Yeah, don't email Jeff. He's got students to teach all day, just like you do.
So fabulous. Thank you so much for your time today. You have one next step from here, which is to sign up for your training this fall.
Sign up for the training.
As you heard from the principal at the Curly, the training is really helpful and feels fast and beneficial for your own leadership. So we're excited to have you take part in that this fall. You can sign up on my learning plan. So all of the sessions will be called ELT TFT Teacher Facilitator Training. and you'll be able to choose which dates work best with your schedule. As we mentioned, there's one evening and then one full day. Some full days are offered on Saturdays if you don't want to be out of your classroom, and some full days are offered on Thursdays or Fridays so that you could not miss a day of your weekend. So sign up soon to get your preferred dates. And just to reiterate, it is an expectation that all TFT facilitators attend this training. It's a part of our process and making sure that you're successful at your school.
And you only need to attend once. So if you're a facilitator for multiple years, you just need to attend once the first time, and then you're good to go after that. It's not required every year.
Yep, and there's some information on the bottom about how to access My Learning Plan. If you have any challenges, feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you to the right person to get you set up.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate your time.
Hope you found it useful.
Have a great TFT. All right.